Arminius, the man who had brought the Romans to their knees in Teutoburg, was on one side. Germanicus, the most powerful Roman general in Rome at the time, was on the other, determined to seek revenge for the deaths of his men in Teutoburg. Who would win this battle? Nearly 5 years have now passed since the Teutoburg catastrophe, and until 14 AD, the Romans had not achieved any major victories over the Germanics. Several tribes saw it as particularly useful to start allying themselves with Arminius against Roman control. There were even Cherusi, headed by their uncle, Inguiomer, who hadn't supported the initial attack, but who then joined Arminius' side. In spite of this growing support, Segestes, a leader of the Cherusi, and also Arminius' father-in-law, still preferred to remain loyal to Rome. And it is obvious that this eventually undermined his authority and popularity within the tribe. Retaliating for this endorsement, Arminius ordered his allies to arrest his father-in-law. Segestes then somehow managed to send his own son, Segimundus, to ask the general Germanicus for help. With Segimundus' assistance, Germanicus succeeded in freeing Segestes and capturing some of Arminius' allies, including his wife Thanelsda, at the time pregnant. One can only picture the moment when Arminius' wife, who also happened to be Segestes' daughter, found herself face to face with her father, who was now free and also on the enemy side. Notwithstanding past grudges, Germanicus, with Segestes' son's defection and some other Germanic warriors who had quit to follow Arminius, spotted an opportunity. All the evidence suggests that not only had this son of Segestes fought against Rome, but that he had also defiled the corpse of the general Publius Varus. Given this rebellious background, the reigning emperor, Tiberius, decided to pardon all those involved. The exiled were not only given a place to live in the empire, but also a lifetime pension. This strategy not only secured the loyalty of these new allies, but also weakened Arminius' position by undercutting his internal support. On hearing that his father-in-law had permitted his pregnant daughter to be imprisoned, Arminius was enraged. As Tacitus put it, Arminius said that the Romans were cowards and lacked the nerve to stand up to him, which is why they went after his wife. At that point, referring to Germanicus, Arminius said, "We have defeated Augustus and his heir Tiberius. Why should we cower before an inexperienced teenager and his mutinous army?" Arminius was referencing the rebellion that had taken place among Germanicus' soldiers following Augustus' death. Now having captured some of Arminius' allies, Germanicus decided to escalate his chase. As he pressed on, Arminius took advantage of the rough and muddy terrain and managed once again to attack the Romans in a swampy forest and score a small victory. His uncle, Inguiomer, then suggested attacking the Romans in open terrain, but the attempt was unsuccessful, mainly due to the Roman army's greater experience in such conditions. Throughout the following 2 years, the Romans, led by Germanicus, continued their raids against various Germanic tribes that had allied themselves with Arminius and recovered one of their banners that had been lost. Nonetheless, they were unable to confront Arminius and his soldiers during this period. The Romans' image was heavily tied to their ability to avoid any kind of defeat, however small. Every time they carried out an expedition, it felt as if they were engaging in a mind game. It was not a question of utterly defeating a tribe, but of conveying the idea that the Romans were invincible. When they withdrew strategically, it not only showed their military strength, but also sent a clear message: the Romans were powerful and strong-willed. Yet, with every expedition he undertook, Germanicus faced a challenge: how to achieve a balance between strength and agility in his expeditions. This is why he aimed to cause destruction and spread terror over a wide area, displaying Roman military capabilities. Withdrawing without incurring heavy losses was the crux of this strategy. The objective was to sow fear in the tribes, persuading them that resisting was pointless. Despite not having won any major victories after Teutoburg, the mere fact of having avoided significant defeats boosted Arminius' reputation. Throughout the winter months, Germanicus spent time preparing for battle, uniting all 8 legions into a single force. The empire's western provinces, although faced with challenges, sent grain, horses, and pack animals to strengthen the army. The strategic choice of moving the army by water, sailing along the North Sea coast, and landing inside enemy territory meant that almost 1,000 boats had to be built. The diplomatic campaign to attract Germanic leaders to the Roman side continued as well, resulting in some important defectors, such as Segimur, who was Segestes' brother. Alongside the practical arrangements, Germanicus took advantage of those months to focus his attention on improving the health and morale of his men. He visited the winter barracks hospitals, talked to the soldiers, and extolled their feats of courage, giving them the morale they would need later on. Then, in the spring of 16 AD, Germanicus was set to continue his pursuit and put an end to Arminius for the last time. By joining the squadron in the territory of the Batavi, an allied tribe, the Roman army started preparing for the campaign. By sending a small column to attack the Chatti, Germanicus learned of an attack on the Roman fort close to where Varus's disgrace had taken place. This was a prelude to the ensuing showdown. But before that, the tombs that Germanicus had built for the soldiers in Teutoburg were razed to the ground by native enemies, and this heightened tensions. Arminius found out that the Roman army was assembled at the river Weser. Among the Roman soldiers, there was someone quite special to him, his brother. However, Arminius' brother was not a prisoner, but an auxiliary soldier in the Roman army. His name was Flavus. When Arminius and his father had defeated the legions at Teutoburg in 9 AD, Flavus had not been with them. He was in Illyria, helping the Roman army in an uprising, where he lost one of his eyes. Once Arminius heard that Flavus was with the other soldiers on the river Weser, he attempted to find a way to meet up with his brother. The two succeeded in meeting and talking on the riverbank, but they were unable to reach an agreement. Flavus asked Arminius to surrender, promising that the Romans would have mercy on them. On the other hand, Arminius urged Flavus to stand up for his people and his roots. The two began to argue, and Flavus almost got into a scuffle with Arminius. Arminius realized that his brother had decided to stay loyal to Rome, but he thought, why not try to convince other Roman soldiers to desert the army and come over to my side? He decided to send emissaries to the Roman camp to try to convince the soldiers to desert. To do so, they offered great sums of money, land, and wives. In an attempt to further undermine Roman morale, Arminius presented the offer to desert in Latin, letting it be known that some of the former Roman soldiers were already fighting on his side. As his envoys made this offer, Arminius decided to retreat to a strategic position in a sacred forest. There were rumors among Germanicus' soldiers of a night attack on the Roman camp, and this brought a certain amount of tension. Germanicus took precautions and decided to keep his legions on alert. As a seasoned general, he knew that his soldiers were probably distressed and afraid. To assess the morale of his troops, Germanicus decided to disguise himself with a hood made of animal skin, silently walking through the tents at night, listening to the soldiers' conversations. As he went around the camp to find out how the soldiers were feeling, Germanicus was surprised by the soldiers' faith in and concern for him as their general. Early the next morning, he addressed his army, presenting a cunning strategy. Having spotted the vulnerable features of the Germanics, he pointed out the effectiveness of the Roman pilum, gladius, and breastplate. The commander instigated the legionaries to attack quickly and harshly, drawing attention to the Germanics' vulnerability, as they lacked strong armor and shields. The tactical difference between the two armies was obvious, and Germanicus wanted to take advantage of it. Arminius simultaneously drew up a strategy to confront the Romans on the hills of Edistaviso, once again making effective use of the sloping terrain and the woods in his rear. With Gaul and Germanic auxiliaries leading the way, followed by 4 legions under Germanicus, the battle was set to rage. There were also 2 cohorts of the Praetorian Guard and a strategic assortment of cavalry that deployed the Roman army to face the Germanic rebels. Notwithstanding the drawbacks of the terrain, the Romans excelled in battle tactics and managed to push back the Germanics, putting even Arminius in a perilous situation, nearly being captured. Apparently, when the battle begun, some of the Cherusi disobeyed Arminius' orders, dashing forward and quickly being pushed back by Roman cavalry. Under Germanicus, the Roman infantry pressed forward with determination, confronting and repelling the Germanics. Striving to change the tide of battle, Arminius led an attack against the Roman archers, but was met with stiff resistance from the auxiliary heavy infantry. Arminius, wounded and aware of the impending defeat, chose to escape by smearing his face with his own blood to conceal his identity. It was rumored that Germanic auxiliaries, perhaps from the Caucasian tribe, facilitated his escape. The Germanic army, in disarray and under intense Roman attack, suffered significant losses. While Tacitus does not give specific statistics, the Roman casualties were fairly small, and all of Germanicus' soldiers celebrated the victory. Despite the early defeat, the Germanics were far from giving up. They established their position again, choosing strategic terrain between a tricky swamp and a woodland near a river. They built a fence similar to one used in Varus's ambush. The German infantry took cover near the bastion, while the cavalry moved into position in the wooded areas a little further back, ready to attack the Roman rearguard. Fully aware of the enemy presence, the Romans headed by Germanicus decided to fight another battle in open country. Letting the cavalry cover open terrain, they divided the infantry into two units. The first attack met with difficulties and some Roman casualties. After rearranging the forces, Germanicus brought in slingers and marksmen, who succeeded in defeating the Germanic warriors who were standing at a longer distance, destroying their shields and armor. Germanicus spearheaded the breakthrough with two Praetorian cohorts, while the Roman forces advanced into the woodland terrain to seize this tactical advantage. The Germanics' numerical advantage then became a handicap, as the Romans, more skilled in close combat, managed to turn the tide. Probably still recovering from recent wounds, Arminius took a minor role in the second battle. His uncle, Inguiomer, took command, although this did not prevent the Germanics from suffering heavy casualties. At the end of the day, Germanicus withdrew a legion to start setting up camp and raised another trophy to celebrate the victory. This decisive victory prompted some tribes to swear allegiance to the Roman Empire. Following this, Germanicus had the bold idea of bypassing the Germanics by sea to take them by surprise, but it ended up failing. Over 1,000 ships carrying legionaries to their destination were hit by a storm that destroyed a significant part of the army. Emperor Tiberius, already pleased with the victories achieved and well aware of the risks involved in continuing the campaign, decided it was time to stop. The effort and resources allocated to the temporary conquering of forests and swamplands no longer seemed to justify the endeavor. The quest to conquer Germania had ended, and although he had lost to the Romans, Arminius was also victorious for having succeeded in removing Roman influence from the region. On his return to Rome, Germanicus was celebrated with a triumph, a feast in honor of his victories. Everyone in Rome was keenly anticipating Germanicus' return. Upon his arrival, he was feted with a triumph for his victories. Wearing ceremonial robes, two cohorts of the prestigious Praetorian Guard were waiting to welcome him. But such was the respect for the general that all 9 cohorts wanted to attend this historic moment, a mark of respect for the leader who vindicated Rome. The whole Roman celebration unfolded before the eyes of Arminius' son, who was quite young at the time and had been born into captivity. Having successfully warded off the threat of Roman occupation, Arminius had to deal now with tribal fights breaking out again in Germania, and his own uncle and greatest ally Inguiomer now wanted to take over. As a result, Arminius' peace of mind was short-lived, and just 3 years after the Roman troops left Germania in 19 AD, he was killed by his own relatives at the age of 37. By a twist of fate, these were the same people who had made Arminius the supreme leader of the entire Germania. The internal power struggle was so intense that the Cherusi had to beg Rome to intervene and send them a king years later. And do you know who Rome sent? Do you remember Flavius, brother of Arminius? His son, Italicus, was sent by the then Emperor Claudius to be the new Cherusi king. As a result, Rome just had to watch and wait until the Germanics needed its help again. If you enjoyed learning more about the history of Roman revenge in Germania, please like and subscribe to the channel.